Women in Leadership series. I'm Jess, an investor with AlbionVC, and I'm joined by our talent director, Jane.
Hi, Jess.
And we are so pleased to have Ruth Whittaker here, the co-founder of CISIV.
Hi, really pleased to be here.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for your time today. So what we're doing is, in celebration of International Women's Day, Jane and I are hosting a series of conversations with all the female founders and CEOs in the AlbionVC portfolio. And so today, Ruth, we'd like to sort of pick your brain a bit on being a founder and then move into a quick fire round of would you rather type questions to learn more about you and about your leadership approach.
Brilliant.
Just to introduce the audience to CISIV and what they do. So CISIV is software that powers late-stage clinical research. Specifically, it's an electronic data capture platform designed for phase 4 and real-world evidence style studies. It's focused on decentralized, large population and non-interventional trials. And it's specifically designed for this type of study, which is pretty unique amongst the field. Albion actually first invested in this business in 2013. And in a year when we all learned more than we cared to about clinical trials, we know your technology is sort of more important than ever in powering clinical research. So I'd love to hear, Ruth, in your own words, how you came to found the company.
I mean, originally I was born and brought up in New Zealand and came over to Europe following university. And I think at the time, in London particularly, there was loads of different jobs, and being a New Zealander, you were able to very, very quickly be helicoptered into all sorts of different roles because we had this sort of reputation as being hardworking and capable, and in retrospect, that was a really good learning curve for me in terms of what came later in founding a company is that I had the opportunity to be involved in all sorts of different kind of aspects of I guess, work in many different industries. So I worked in the FT and the city, ESSA Petroleum, lots of different ones. And you'd be sort of helicoptered in to do a job that, you had to sort of start on day one with this kind of hat on that said, yeah, absolutely, I can do this, even if you'd never seen it before. So, in that respect, it was a really great foundation for what, comes later when you're founding a company, is that you find that you're doing all sorts of things that you never realized you might. And that was a real kind of, I guess, a sort of confidence point for me in my career. And so I did various things. I traveled, I taught English in Barcelona for a while, came back to London and had a job where I was working on a project which was it was early stage sort of multimedia, where we were setting up a interactive CD-ROM for around the pill scare back in the late 90s. And the purpose of the CD-ROM was a really sort of medical education. It was for medical professionals, it was for journalists. And when I was working on that role, that's when I started working with Dominic, who's my co-founder and CEO. Following that, we had various different projects with large pharma. And we were at a point where we were sort of a generalized software company, really. We worked directly with pharma, and they would give us all sorts of different projects, ranging from large scale global intranets for one of the large pharma to what at the time was the first, possibly the first ever platform to do a study on a late phase study on a drug. So we were asked to build this, and at the time it started off, it was only going to be in a couple of countries in Europe, but it was so popular, it ended up in 19 countries around the world. We had hundreds of thousands of patients, and it was a really, really successful project. And so we went on to do some more of these for this particular pharma company. But at the same time, we'd had this really quite successful global intranet with them as well, which worked around lots of their operating companies. And Dom and I had built up this team that we worked with, and we thought, well, we could do one or two things here. We could carry on being a sort of general software house, and going out and getting lots of different projects, which in itself is quite interesting, but not necessarily sustainable. Or we could take one of these two kind of large scale projects that we've done and turn it into a product. And we decided that the study platform was in an area, as you've already said, Jess, was, it's kind of like nobody else was really doing this. It had been really successful, and, it's really interesting. So we decided that we would focus on that, turn into a product company, go and get investment. And I guess that's at the point where, the journey that I'm going to be talking about today, I guess, begins. So Albion was, as you say, one of our investors in 2013, and you were our first venture investor. So a very kind of crucial, I guess, part in our story of our journey from there.
That's fantastic. I love that story of sort of finding that initial product fit and then deciding to sort of go for it by productizing it and building a business around it. But also the lessons learned from, needing to take on lots of different and unexpected type of roles, and the sort of way that transfers over into being a founder. You sort of learn to be a jack of all trades and sort of learn on the job.
And also, I love that. Sorry, Jess, to cut across you there. You can retrofit it, and it all makes sense. And at the time, it doesn't.
I have to say, doing this particular exercise and looking back, and you think,
it was leading. That's true.
And a lot of it is simply about having the confidence to pick up the phone, make a phone call to somebody about something that you know very little about, but you learn how to find the right people to help you do, what it is you need to do, and that's one of the kind of.
That's the inspiring bit about, what you're saying here. Yeah.
Speaking of sort of learning new things and teaching yourself, what would you say is one of the most unexpected things about your sort of first years as a founder of your own business?
Well, when I thought about this question as well, actually, and this isn't a plug for Albion, so I'd just like to put it out there that you're not paying me for this, but it was really interesting to look back and realize that having that sort of venture investment behind us, it's going to open doors for you. But I think what I didn't realize is the kind of empowerment that it gives you when you're knocking on those doors, to sort of have that in your background rather than just, having to be, here I am, an individual who's going and asking you for something or negotiating something. To have that, it was really quite empowering. And I think that was just really interesting, because when you have founded a company and you're kind of, it's you and the rest of the world, because you don't have a structure behind you or, a boss to go to, or, a lot of it you have to find within yourself. So, I would say that was really empowering.
That's great. That's really nice to hear that we were able to contribute a little bit in that way. When you think about your own journey over the last couple of years, sort of running this business, what would you say is the biggest change you've seen in yourself, from the first years to now?
I think it's recognizing what your own strengths are, and learning to trust your instincts as well. I think is something that I found has grown over, with experience, is that, just kind of finding that, recognition of your own abilities is what I've learned.
Yeah, that's I'm hearing a lot actually from in all of these interviews, is that confidence is really key to owning the role, and it just grows and grows in this sort of virtuous cycle in a really positive way as you continue to run the business.
Absolutely.
And we've also heard a lot about sort of trusting your gut and your own intuition as you navigate decisions.
Yeah, no, I think that really is something that just keeps coming. I keep coming back to, actually, because you're not necessarily taught that, that it's okay to do that. But I think, when you're running your own business, you find that gets validated over and over again, hopefully, if things are going well. Yeah.
Right. When you think about, those inner strengths that have really contributed to your being able to lead the business, What would you and what would your team say your superpower is?
Okay, so I'm calm. I'm calm, and I'm grounded, and I'm balanced. Doesn't sound very super when you first think about it, but yeah, those are my sort of, I guess, my superpowers.
I love that, though. I think it's such a valuable skill to remain calm under pressure, and, as you say, grounded and balanced. It's a rare but a very important quality, I'd say, in a leader.
Yeah, especially in an environment that's as chaotic as a startup is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you need that person who's just kind of keeping things on a level. Yeah.
Speaking of the sort of chaotic environment that can occur in early stage businesses, we know a big part of trying to execute in that environment is the ability to focus.
Yeah.
So how do you think about now saying yes versus saying no to competing priorities?
When I looked at this question, I think the thing that came to me first is it's really important to have a vision for your company, and learning to recognize what the company needs at any given time is a real, that's really important. But learning how to say no is probably often, it's much more difficult than learning how to say yes. It's nice to say yes. But sometimes you have to pivot really quickly as a business. Things can change in whatever, the market, the landscape. I mean, last year was a great, case in point. And so you have to have that sort of flexibility to be able to say no to something you may have said yes to even just a week ago, and to turn things. So prioritizing, is something that you have to do on a very, very regular basis.
What have you learned about a really good way to do that?
Sorry, what have I learned?
Sorry, if the sound went wrong. What have you learned about a really good way to do that? Having had to say no to something that you'd even sort of said yes to. How do you navigate that? For somebody who's potentially facing that situation, what have you learned about how to do it well versus badly? Right.
Well, I mean, for me, in some ways, I have the advantage because I'm finance director. You can always fall back on the figures.
Oh, right.
But that's really important, because at the end of the day, you have to keep in, this is what we're doing, is that, we can have great ideas and, and ideals and visions, but at the end of the day, cash is king, as they say. You've got to make sure that you keep your eye on the cash, and because that's the security that is everybody's jobs, so I think, it's difficult, but you need to be able to bring your team along with you. You need to explain to them why we've had to change, our track here. And that's where the vision piece comes in. I think as if people can see that you've all got the same vision, but sometimes you just got to take a slightly different path to get there, or you just have to slow down for a little bit, or perhaps, you have to speed up, which is actually a position we're in at the moment where we're having to speed up quite significantly. And again, that's a challenge too.
Absolutely. Such a need to stay agile.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as you think about sort of building your team and the kind of people around you that empower you to execute, what strengths do you think you need in the ideal sort of wingman or wingwoman?
I think someone who challenges your ideas, and can give you really, constructive feedback, I think is really important.
And feedback is one of those must cultivate qualities in a high-performing team. I'd really love to ask you now one of your other questions about how you've built your own high-performing team, if that's okay. Would you rather, even thinking about before you get to the feedback stage, when you're hiring your team or creating that leadership team, would you rather hire for EQ or IQ?
I don't think that those two things are mutually exclusive. And I think EQ is really important, but EQ you can teach, or you can help develop people's EQ. And I think this is particularly, we have a program where we bring in grads and train them up to do a specific study designer role. And, young people straight out of university, they don't necessarily they may have some innate, natural emotional intelligence, but they haven't had the experience. And I think emotional intelligence kind of goes hand in hand with experience.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I think for us, like, being smart as a kind of, it's one of our sort of gateway qualities that we look for in people. And I think a smart person has both EQ and IQ.
Yeah.
So sorry, no. Yes or no answer there.
Yeah, I know. This is the challenging thing, isn't it, with this type of question, is that all of the questions I'm going to ask you today, Ruth, you're going to want all of it.
I know.
And that's why it's so difficult. That's why it's so, challenging, because if you could only, but nevertheless, really thought-provoking. What you just said there is really insightful, actually, as you say that emotional intelligence can increase as we mature emotionally as well, and it's really good to know, and I believe it too, that you can teach it. So would you rather get things done or get things right?
Get things right.
Get things right. And how do you mitigate then against the need to grow fast?
It can be really tempting to just say, let's just get this done. But we know from experience that often when you do that, those things, if you didn't quite get it right, it actually will come back and bite you. It wastes time in the end. There's the old adage, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And it is true. It is not always possible to carve out enough time to perhaps do things to the level of perfection that you might really want. But I think having that aim to get it right quality is fundamental, and it's really important in what we do as well.
I was just about to say, pronounced because of the environment you're in, the clinical.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're audited against also. So we have loads and loads of process, and our quality is really, really important to what we do and where we work.
Yeah. Really good to hear in that environment that becomes then a North Star, as a sort of, as you say, as an operating principle. It just is vital. Would you rather hit your numbers and have mistrust in your team, because you do have to hit your numbers at some point, or trust your team but miss your numbers?
I think that you can't hit your numbers if you don't trust your team. Really.
So if you miss your numbers, and you've got trust, which, as you say, is vital, how do you then challenge your team and hold them to account? What have you done that's worked there so that you actually have both of those things?
I think, we're in a bit of a situation where we haven't had a commercial arm for since COVID, and we've had a bit of a sort of change around that. So a lot of our growth has actually been quite organic. We have a few really close customers, and we're just about to start on the journey now of really going out there and taking our message to the wider market, because we have been growing alongside these quite strong but quite small number of close partners. So I guess I can't really answer your question directly in that respect. Yeah, because that sort of organic growth has kind of been what's taken us forward at this stage. So ask me in a year's time and I'll be able to answer it for you.
It's so interesting to talk to you though about just the different markets of our portfolio and the things that are important, the factors that are important when you're creating a company which does what you do. It's really interesting. So perhaps again, as a point of inspiration for others, watching this, you have been through, you've been an entrepreneur for a long time. The question is, would you rather, thinking about yourself, kind of at the beginning, would you rather have lots of infectious persuasiveness or lots of analytical decision capability?
Right. So if I was at the early stages of my journey, it would be, I'd like to see myself as someone who was infectiously persuasive. But what I have learned is that really needs to be underpinned by, really solid analysis. Because at the end of the day, that's what gives people the confidence, I think, to either do the job that you're asking them to do if it's somebody in your team, or with one of our clients or customers.
Right.
You need that analysis. You can only go so far on, a great smile.
And if you look at the 10 years, and even before then, that you'd had the genesis for your company, when about roughly did that sort of pivot, if you like, that that seesaw happen for you?
Probably quite early on, because we work with the pharmaceutical industry. SOPs, which are standard operating procedures, is something we came across quite early on, and the drug development life cycle, pretty hot on SOPs, and that is all about structure and doing things, I guess, in an analyzed way rather than the creative problem solving side. But to be fair, I think we've got to where we are because we can do both. And because we've got the experience of having done this for a long time, we can easily see answers to our clients' problems. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Great segue into me asking you about your customers. This is perhaps a tough one to answer because and unfair, but so I'm putting you on the spot here. But the question is, would you rather have happy customers or a happy team?
Ooh. Now, that wasn't on your list, so I haven't thought about that. Would I rather have happy customers or a happy team? I think, again, if your team is not happy, then your customers are not going to be happy. It has to come from the team. Yeah. It's all very well, you can have a figurehead who goes out there and makes everybody happy, but if your team is not behind you, with you doing that, then your customer isn't going to be happy. So
I love that, Ruth. And it's so vital as a lever of growth, isn't it? You can ignore your team or underplay the importance of your team and think that because you've got a phenomenal idea or a phenomenal market, and actually it's what you're saying to us today, which really resonates, is it stems from the team.
It does, yeah.
So thinking about you as the leader in the team, I'd love to ask your quick fire would you rather questions, just to unpick you a little bit, if we may.
Okay.
So would you rather learn a new musical instrument or a new sport?
Ooh. Probably a sport, because I don't see myself as massively musical.
Okay, wonderful. And what about learn a new spoken language or a new computer language?
Spoken language, but only because that's a kind of comfort zone for me, because I've learned languages before. But actually, I really like this question because it's made me question myself as to why I don't see myself as someone who would learn a computer language. And so I've kind of I've closed myself off to an opportunity there that maybe I shouldn't.
That is wonderful, isn't it? Like, you just have a little nudge, it opens your mind as to, why have I labelled myself as somebody who's
Exactly.
good at this? Would you rather be rich or famous?
Oh, I would. That's a really tough one. I don't want to be famous, that's for sure. And again, being rich, I think, neither of those things are something that I kind of have as a goal in my life.
Wow. Amazing.
A job that satisfies me.
Yes. Yeah. Do you have what is the driver? If you had to just call out one thing that you're like, oh, that's what I want to be.
I think, the journey that I'm on at the moment with the company is, we've got some great goals, and I really, for me, it's really satisfying to be getting closer to those. And just being asked to do this today actually has kind of opened my mind to what to me is a really important goal is the young people that we bring into our company, and particularly the young women, is, helping. What I would like to see is them being the leaders tomorrow, of not just, at sort of leadership level, but really, at that board level, and that really, making a difference. And it's been a really interesting journey. Yeah.
And that's so inspiring. You're like a host, you're enabling the next generation, and then to hear that you're on your right path as well is also incredibly inspiring, particularly in these times, where we're all called into, question some of those things potentially. That's really brilliant to hear. Would you rather have, sorry, Jess.
just follow up on that, Ruth. That's exactly what we're trying to sort of inspire with this, is to show, younger women coming in, or even people in sort of middle ranks, that there are women all the way at the top who have founded their own thing, who are CEOs, who are at the very top of organizations. And it's just nice to sort of highlight those voices as role models for to show everyone that you can do it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really great. And actually, and what it does for, when you're asking us to do that as well, is makes you realize that A, you've got something you can give back, but B, actually it's validating where we've got to, and that I think is really important.
Yeah, and the goals that you could, the label of are we aiming for rich or for famous, actually for you to say neither, it's just golden, absolutely golden. Would you rather have a pause button on your life or a rewind?
Well, I think a pause, because I'm at that point in my life. But when you do put, to pause some of those really special, precious moments in life would be lovely. But then again, you may need to rewind to get back to them. So, but I think remembering to just really, enjoy the moment, is something.
That's right. Yeah, it's like a mental picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Core memory. Excuse me. I've got a catch in my throat. Would you rather never be angry or never be envious?
Oh, never be envious.
Yeah, futile emotion.
Yeah.
Would you rather be funnier than you are or smarter than you are?
Oh, both. Sorry. Couldn't choose.
We might let you as soon as you've been so good on the other questions. Would you rather never age or never need sleep?
I'd rather never age, because I really like sleeping. So.
Me too. Would you rather die in 20 years with some regrets though, or live to 100 and not have any?
Now this I find a difficult question, because because my definition of no regrets, I think actually is something that would make me live longer, rather than shorten my life, because it's kind of that rock and roll question that it assumes that a regret is, that it's something dangerous. But for me, I would regret, not taking that time to spend with friends and family, or, have the conversations that are really important conversations, or, do some things that may be scary, but they're not necessarily going to shorten my life. So again, I can't actually say one or the other to those, because I do find it a kind of, it doesn't sit with my worldview of what a regret is.
Yeah, very insightful and very well said. Would you rather be in the history books for doing something horrendous, be a monster, or be completely forgotten after you die?
Completely forgotten.
Yeah, I could have guessed that, which is, to your point of not being famous for anything.
Yeah.
Good or for bad. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ruth. So lovely to talk.
Thank you.
To sort of wrap things up on maybe a note of sort of lessons learned over the course of your sort of founder journey, what advice do you think you would give to your younger self?
So I thought about this, and my advice to my younger self would be to just not limit myself by the definition that I place on myself. I think, when you're young, you're kind of, you see yourself as this, and whether that be based on what you were taught or told at school, or, the environment that you grow up in, but you kind of, you know, you put yourself in a box and say, this is who I am. And I think, you know, it's really good to look at the things that you either can't do or you won't do, and then ask yourself, well, why can't I do that? Or why won't I do that? So, for example, you know, learning a computer language, that was kind of in that box of that's what other people do, or that's what a techie person does, or, you know, but actually why, if I learn a foreign language, it's, you know, and I'm happy about that, then why wouldn't I learn a computer language? And so I think it would be to question that, those limits that you place on yourself, and ask yourself, why have you put them there in the first place? So yeah,
I think questioning the labels that we give ourselves, especially early on, to, you know, push ourselves to do something. Say, why not? You know, why couldn't I?
Exactly.
Why not?
Yeah.
Really inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth. This has been really fun. We'll let you have a lovely rest of your Friday afternoon, but thanks so much for your time.
It was really nice to meet you, and thank you very much for, you know, for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely.